Right.
You know, Jake Paul's a kid that's out doing his thing. He's trying to make some money,
Right.
whatever his deal is.
Yeah, I'll fight you.
You would fight me?
Why not?
Dana White just brutally humiliates Jake and Logan Paul for yet another desperate stunt to grab attention. After scamming fans with a scripted fight against a retired boxer, these two weren't satisfied. So they decided to fool the boxing audience again.
I have the opposite perspective. I feel like ruining my little brother's boxing career would be so bad.
But Dana shuts them down with a brutal reality check, proving once and for all that their promotional antics are nothing but a disgrace to the sport.
Listen, he's a young kid out there trying to make some money.
And after all of this, I can't believe this is the same sport that gave us legends like Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, and Sugar Ray Leonard, and is now being disgraced by two YouTube clowns who have officially run out of ways to scam. Jake announced on Twitter, "The moment you've waited for, March 27th stream on Max." The biggest joke since Floyd Mayweather carried Logan for 8 rounds just to secure an easy paycheck.
Something to do with some sort of episodic thing, right? That was my first thought. This is not a fight. This is some sort of episodic or documentary style.
And now these two brothers, who would sell their own souls for a trending moment, are throwing hands. Not for legacy, not for competition, but because they've exhausted every other ridiculous storyline they could milk. March 27th, 2025. Love on Max. And for what? To see two social media grifters slap each other around in a fight that has all the authenticity of a WWE backstage segment? This isn't a real fight. This is reality TV disguised as boxing. A fake drama where two millionaire brothers pretend to hate each other just long enough to convince gullible fans to cough up their hard-earned money. The backlash? Brutal and deserved. Because let's be real, when an actual fighter steps in the ring, they're fighting for something bigger than themselves. Legacy, honor, greatness. When Jake and Logan do it, they're fighting for clicks, prime sales, and the next sponsorship deal.
I'm just gonna tell you the truth, it's not. They're not boxing.
Let's talk about actual boxing families. The Klitschko brothers, Vladimir and Vitaly, never fought because they had respect for the sport. The Spinks brothers? Same thing. But the Paul brothers? They'd auction off their own mother if it meant squeezing another dollar out of their fan base. As Chris Mannix said on Twitter, social media ran with this as a fight smart marketing as always. By the Pauls, it was never formally announced as one. And Dana White? He is having the time of his life ripping these two apart. And honestly, when the biggest promoter in combat sports is calling you out for being frauds, you know you've crossed the line from cringe to full-blown embarrassment. He's been exposing them for years, calling them out for being nothing but glorified con artists who pretend to be fighters. And now, with this stunt, he's been proven right. Again.
First time I ever met him, I took my son to the first boxing match. I want to say it was Wilder and Fury. And this kid rolls up on me and got like a fucking jacket on with no shirt. And he rolls up to me the first time. I didn't even know who he was. He's being a total fucking wise ass. I'm like, listen, man, I'm fucking trying to get my seat situated here. He's like, okay, you go on and keep being famous or some shit like that. I'm like, who the fuck is this guy? My son told me who he was.
And Jake, too, has some personal issues with Dana. Jake Paul walks around acting like he's some boxing prodigy. Let's break down his so-called career. He's 11-1. Sounds impressive, right? Until you realize his opponents have included retired MMA fighters with zero boxing experience, social media influencers, and guys old enough to be collecting their retirement checks. And that one time he fought an actual boxer, Tommy Fury. He got humbled so bad he had to go back to making YouTube vlogs just to distract from the loss. And now, instead of taking on another real boxer, he's fighting his own brother. That's how desperate he is to keep the facade going.
Everybody.
Me?
Yeah, I'll fight you.
You would fight me?
Why not? You're tiny.
I'm taller than you.
You're still tiny. It would suck to be the one that has to deal with, you know, losing, but I wouldn't be the one that would have to deal
I have
with
the opposite perspective. I feel like ruining my little brother's boxing career would be so bad.
And Logan? The man has boxed fewer real opponents than he has staged WWE promos. His biggest fights include getting carried by a 44-year-old Floyd Mayweather, who barely tried, and a so-called match against Dylan Dennis, which was less of a fight and more of a WrestleMania warm-up. Logan is 29 years old and somehow still riding the wave of pretending to be a boxer while juggling his WWE gimmick. And this fight? This happens just weeks before WrestleMania, where he's already booked to appear. But sure, let's all pretend like this is a serious fight and not just a promotional circus act to push prime hydration down everyone's throat. And here's the sad part. It's still going to do massive numbers. Why? Because people love a disaster. Jake's so-called fight against Mike Tyson pulled over 60 million views, not because anyone believed it was a real competition, but because everyone wanted to see what level of ridiculousness would happen next. And now, two brothers with zero credibility in the sport are about to turn boxing into a full-blown joke, and people will still tune in just to witness the catastrophe.
Is completely different than what him and his brother are doing. You know what I mean? I'm looking for the absolute best in the world. These guys who have trained their whole life, they fight in these smaller shows and then they make it to the UFC, and we've put the best against the best. It's just not what we do. There's a market for what these guys do, and there's...
Dana White has been saying this for years. These guys aren't fighters. They're opportunists. They've turned boxing into their personal ATM, carefully picking opponents and crafting narratives just to trick people into paying for garbage fights. And now, with this ridiculous matchup, they've once again proved Dana right. This is what happens when you let YouTubers infiltrate combat sports. They turn it into a meme.
Like if I wanted to do a UFC fight, is that something you'd entertain?
Who would you want to fight?
Don't know.
You have wrestling and boxing.
I could get it done.
Do you ever do jiu-jitsu?
Of course.
Yeah.
I could get it done, Dana.
I'm not saying no.
Dana, sign me.
I'm not saying no.
And let's not forget one of Dana's greatest mic drop moments when he publicly humiliated Jake Paul by offering him a real UFC fight against Amanda Nunes. That was Dana's way of saying, if you're really about that fight life, let's see you step in the cage against someone who actually knows what they're doing. And Jake never responded, because deep down, he knows the truth. He's not here for real fights. He's here to cherry-pick his opponents, control the narrative, and make sure that every fight is scripted in his favor. For years, these guys have been whining about UFC fighter pay, taking shots at Dana White, claiming that MMA fighters only get 20% of total revenue, while NBA players get 45%. Oh, how noble of them, acting like they're champions for the underpaid warriors of combat sports. Meanwhile, they're out here raking in more money than every single UFC fighter combined, just by setting up staged celebrity boxing matches against hand-picked opponents.
In the NBA, they're guaranteed a
They
certain
still get
amount of money.
paid. Yeah,
They
what
still
the
get paid.
fuck?
In the UFC, there's no guarantee you have to go in there and fight to get paid.
Oh my God.
And you take all the risk.
It's ruthless, dude. It's ruthless.
Let's cut through the nonsense. Jake and Logan Paul don't give a damn about fighter pay. They care about their own pay. Every time they open their mouths about how UFC fighters deserve better contracts, it's not about standing up for anyone. It's about taking cheap shots at Dana White to keep their names in the headlines. And the irony? These two are doing exactly what they criticized Dana for. They're not in this for competition, not to test themselves against the best. They're here to milk the system, cherry-pick their fights, and cash in on a fan base too blind to see through the scam. Dana White has absolutely torched them for it, and rightfully so. Every time Jake cries about fighter pay, Dana just laughs. Why? Because Jake and Logan are walking proof that you don't need to be a real fighter to make millions. You just need to be a shameless, money-hungry showman. They've done nothing in combat sports, yet somehow millions of people still fall for their gimmicks. It's pathetic.
Poster would have Logan versus Jake. No venue, no anything, right? There's no announcement of an actual fight. On top of that, Jake...
Expect the most scripted trash talk you've ever seen. Childhood grudges will suddenly be dragged up, personal insults will fly, and they'll make sure to sell it so well that even skeptics will start to think, maybe they really do hate each other. They don't. The second the fight ends, they'll be backstage together, laughing and counting their millions while their fans argue over who really won. And let's talk about the fight itself, if you can even call it that. This won't be a real technical boxing match. It will be a carefully planned, choreographed spectacle meant for entertainment, not competition. These guys aren't stepping into the ring to prove who's the better fighter. They're stepping in to put on a show, sell pay-per-views, and remind the world that they are first and foremost entertainers, not athletes. And the saddest part? It's working. People will watch. Not because they respect Jake and Logan as fighters, but because they can't look away from a disaster. They'll tune in just to see how bad it gets, just to see if this fight is the final nail in boxing's credibility. And when it's all over and Jake and Logan are standing there shaking hands, splitting their 9-figure payday, Dana White will be sitting back, shaking his head, knowing that once again, he was right. The biggest joke in boxing isn't Jake versus Logan Paul. It's the fact that people are still falling for it. If you're tired of these frauds ruining boxing, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment. Let's expose this circus for what it really is.